Can you believe this guy still had lead pipe in his house? What am I going to do with this? Stick around, we'll figure it out. Hey folks, it's Bob here. If you find these videos helpful, please hit that subscribe button. Also, don't forget to claim your free video series, The 7 Things You Shouldn't Have to Pay a Plumber to Do. And to learn more about how to prevent a plumbing disaster in your home, check out my new video course, The No-Brainer Home Plumbing Inspection Checklist. Happy plumbing! Wow guys, can you believe this? Lead pipe still in use in good old Brooklyn, New York. When I get into this guy's house, I said, wow, I don't even believe this stuff is still in existence. But nevertheless, this is what I found. Had a leak coming down from the ceiling. I went in there, I looked up, it was coming down an air shaft. And these lead lines were strapped up in the air shaft going to the second and third floor bathrooms. The first floor bathroom actually had brass pipe and a combination of copper pipe. And the only way I was able to access this lead to make the repair was from the first floor bathroom, standing in his bathtub through a window. He had an open window or a double hung window facing into the air shaft. So I'm standing in the tub with my arms extended out the window trying to do this repair. And I was very apprehensive about making the repair, with a torch because, God forbid I drop the torch in the air shaft and then there goes the guy's house. Anyway, real quickly, this is the offending riser, a piece of the offending riser. And this was rubbing up against a hot water line, or the hot water line was rubbing it up against this, and over the years from the constant expansion and contraction, it actually developed a pinhole in the lead here. But just to show you, I mean, look at what they used to do back in the day. They would sell these decorative, I guess you would call them clamps or whatever, to secure the lead. So they would solder these things right onto the lead pipe. And then they could, nail these up to wood, because they didn't use screws in those days. Here is a stopcock. This was on the offending line that was leaking, quarter turn, and obviously this wasn't going to turn. It hadn't been used for years, but just to show you that when you shut these off quarter turn, they had a little drain on them, so you would shut them off and the water would drain out. But just look at the joints that they had to make these joints in the field. This was all prefabricated in the field. Just incredible stuff you're looking at. And to convert over to like brass, they would have these solder nipples, male or female. Now they don't make these anymore. And they would even have dresser couplings. Dresser couplings, for all intents and purposes, are kind of like union fittings. And they would make them to fit over the lead, and then you can convert to brass. In those days it was brass because there wasn't copper around. But the problem is, when I called up the supply house, they said, we don't have any lead dresser coupling. So I didn't want to use the torch. So I says, let me take a shot. This lead, this 1/2 inch lead, is about 5/8 of an inch OD. It's actually between 5/8 and 3/4. So I says, what am I going to do? So I said, let me take a shot. Maybe I'll get lucky with a shark bite fitting. So I put my depth mark on there through use of a gauge. There it is, right there. I use this gauge here. And I said, let me try to use the shark bite coupling, a reducing coupling, and believe it or not, it held. It held really good. Problem is because this is a 3/4 inch shark bite fitting, and that lead is kind of like between 5/8 and 3/4. The O-ring didn't hold, so when I turned the water on, it actually leaked. So plan B was I was going to have to go back and go back to basics and solder the joint. So I'm going to jump into a short screencast here, about 3 minutes. I'll show you what I did, what I eventually did, and then we'll jump back to the bench and I will show you how I made that joint. I really didn't want to do it. I had to be very careful because I was in an air shaft. And, I was a little shaky about, what if I drop the torch while I'm doing this? But at any rate, I did it. The job is done. The customer's happy. So let's jump into the screencast, and then we'll come back to the bench. I'll show you how I made that joint. And, yeah, believe it or not, guys, this stuff is still out there. And I will see you in a second, and then we'll jump back on the bench. Still can't believe this guy had lead water pipes all over his house, hot and cold water lead pipes. Check out this stopcock. Now, this stopcock is typical back in the day. Naturally, looking at this, you can tell that it wasn't going to turn in either direction. It was totally frozen in place. But look at the way they had to join the brass portions of the stopcock to the lead on either end with those joints that they actually had to do in the field. Just amazing, the craftsmanship back in the day. This was the actual leak. This line was up in the air shaft. It was up against the hot water line, and through the expansion and contraction over the years, just kept rubbing up against the side of the lead pipe, and it just developed a pinhole in the pipe. And that's what happened. The water was pouring down the ceiling, and because it was up against the hot water line, until I actually physically separated it, did I realize what it was. Just amazing in today's day and age. And this is a shot of some of the lead lines that, as I was cutting them out, because they were going over beams in between joists, it was just incredible. And I was just cutting them off and getting them out of the way and prepping to run a new copper water line to connect to this lead up in the shaft from the first floor bathtub. Actually, there was access to the shaft from the first floor bathtub. And I was working through a window, actually. It was really, really incredible. So nobody had the typical lead dresser coupling available, because when I asked them at the supply house, they looked at me like I had a couple of heads. And so I said, wow, what am I going to do? I really don't want to use a torch in there, but let me go out and try a shark bite fitting. And lo and behold, the shark bite fitting, although it was just a tad large, it did clip onto the lead, as you can see there in the top. But unfortunately, the O-ring didn't hold. So when I turned the water on, it did leak. Didn't leak a lot, but it did leak. So back to basics and the good old cup joint. So the upper section of this picture you're looking at is a piece of copper that I tinned with the solder. That's why it looks silver. And then I reamed, or I bored out with a drill bit the lead to sit the copper in there, and I melted solder around the entire diameter there, and I made what they call a cup joint. And that's pretty much what I did in the old days. And here you go. Here's another shot of it. And you'll see that cup joint. Now, there are varying opinions. Guys will say, oh, you should have built up more solder. There should have been more solder. You should have made a bigger buildup of lead. You know what? That may or may not be. But the fact is, I'm working in an air shaft. I'm working with a torch. I got to be as careful as I can. And I pretty much guarantee you the rest of the lead in this house will leak before my joint leaks. And here is the final shot. You'll see I actually came up from the basement with the copper, made a U-turn, and I actually bent that lead up. That lead was facing down, and I made a J-bend, so to speak, so it would face up so I could do a joint, right side up. So what I'll do is I'll jump back on the bench now and just give you an idea of the prep that I did on that piece of copper and demonstrate for you on the vise what it looks like. All right, guys, before we go over to the vise and I actually show you how to solder this copper tubing into this piece of lead, I just want to give you a little prep or preparation before you do something like this. And I highly advise that if you're a novice or do-it-yourselfer watching this, you shouldn't really do this. You should hire a pro to do this. Again, I haven't done this. It's got to be 30 years since I've actually joined a piece of copper or a piece of brass to lead. But nevertheless, it's like riding a bike. You kind of never forget. A little rusty. And bear in mind, when you watch me do this over on the vise, I have this camera very close. So I'm being very cautious with my torch because I don't want to burn my equipment. But at any rate, take a look here. This is the actual joint you're going to see me do over there on the vise. So this was the final product as it turned out. But let me flip this over. I'll show you what I did to prep it. So this is the same piece of lead. So, in the old days, I had a whole bunch of specialty tools. We actually used a wooden top. It was like it was the shape of a top, solid wooden top, and we would put it in here and whack it with a hammer, and it would flare out the lead, and we could actually get it to expand to the point where we could put a solder nipple in there. Don't forget, we weren't putting the brass right in there. We were putting a solder nipple in there, which was, quite small, would fit in there nicely. But in this case, in this modern day and age, again, since I haven't done it, I went out and got I have a little Lennox bit here that I put into my drill, my portable drill, and I bore that out, and that allowed me to get a piece of copper to fit in there. And let me just reach over here for a piece. And yeah, so that copper just sat in there. And you're going to see that over on the vise. Okay. And basically, I use a couple of other tools in order to get this job done. The solder that I use is a 60-40 mix. This is bar solder. And it's like 60% lead to 40% tin, I believe. I know they make it in opposite ratios, 60% tin, 40% lead. I believe this is 60% lead, 40% tin. Can you do this with spool solder? Sure, you could. But, I've had this. I use this when I solder floor flanges onto toilet lead bends. So I'm used to using this. And what I did, and you'll see this over at the vise. I tinned my copper. I cleaned this off. I buffed it. I put my flux on it, and then I got my bar solder and heated it up and tinned it. So tinted is simply putting a coat of solder on there, and then you're going to see at the vise how I drizzled a bead. I heated up the solder and let it drip, and I made a bead around the copper. You'll see that over at the vise. Okay, a couple of other tools. Let me back up. Once I bore this out with the bit, then I got my rasp, my file, and I file this. And now one thing I want to mention that is that, if you're going to clean something and then proceed to, go through with the soldering process right away, no problem. You just have at it. But if you think you're going to be doing some prep and you're going to put the work down and you're not going to be doing it, for a half hour, 20 minutes, I highly recommend you get yourself a candle. You melt the candle wax on here, because that'll prevent this from oxidizing, because oxidation is going to prevent the solder from actually doing its job. Now, a candle. This is a paraffin candle. You can't find these around too much anymore in the plumbing supply houses. It's a special mixed candle, and I use it for two things. It's to protect my work. If I'm going to clean my work and come back to it, later on, I'll melt some candle on there to keep the oxidation at bay. The other reason I use this is while I'm soldering, if I feel things are getting a little too hot, I'm gonna use the candle to cool things down. And this takes experience, guys. It takes a while for you to get used to, you could actually see, I could see when things are getting too hot. So I'll cool it down with the candle. And another tool that I use, and you don't see these around anymore. I mean, I've had these in my toolbox for a long time. This is a wiping cloth. And simply, this is like old, they used to, I think, make these out of mattress material. You could see that. It looks like mattress material. But and what I do is I melt the paraffin candle into the mattress material. I impregnate the cloth with the wax, and what that does is when I'm wiping the lead, or when I'm trying to make a nice smooth joint, it keeps the solder from sticking to the cloth. Now, years ago, when I got my master plumber's license, first of all, we used to get better quality cloths. The ones they have today are just mass produced, if you can even get them anymore. But you can make your own. And maybe I'll do a video one day on that. But we used to use something called plumber's soil, which kind of looked like a paste shoe polish, but it was water-based. And we would open up these cloths to whatever size. I don't know if they were 12 by 12. I'm taking a guess here. I'm not sure. 12 by 12. Open them up, and we would, brush on this. It was like a water-based plumber's soil. And the old timers, rather than use water and brush it on, they would actually spit in it, because the spit would create a better consistency, and then they would brush this whole cloth, and it would ultimately be black. They'll let that dry. Once that dried, they would melt the paraffin candle onto the cloth, and now you had a beautiful, beautiful cloth, and you could wipe lead, and nothing would stick to it. But, you know, I can't find that soil anymore, so I just get my wiping cloth and I melt the wax into it, and I'm good to go. So the paraffin candles, I don't think you're going to find them in plumbing supply houses today. The candles they have today are just like plain, cheap candles that really don't do the job too well. These paraffin candles hold up to the heat well, and they do a good job. So if you can find a paraffin candle, you know, go have at it. Again, I wouldn't recommend anybody do a job like this themselves. But at any rate, so we're going to jump over to the vise over there, and I'm going to show you how I do this joint. And again, just bear in mind, I'm very close to this piece with my camera, so I'm being very careful and cautious with the camera. It's not to burn my equipment. So, you know, I may do things differently in the field when I have more room. But so I hope you enjoy this, guys, and I'll see you over at the vise, and enjoy the process. Okay, guys, now that you have a little better idea of how I prepped this, let me show you what I did. Again, I haven't done this for years, but I was faced with a situation. I had to do it. So let me get the torch and I'll show you exactly what I did. Bear in mind, we cleaned out the inside of the lead. We tinned our copper tubing, and I drizzled a blob of 60-40 solder around the tube. And now let me show you how to complete the job. Well, guys, that's loosely what I had to do in the air shaft. So I'm going to get this candle, and the candle not only removes or prevents oxidation from happening between cleaning and when you're ready to do your work, but it also cools down my work. So I'm going to just let my candle wax cool this off. And I'm going to let this cool off, and then I'm going to come back and I'll turn the camera back on again. So I'll be right back. So there we are, guys. It's cooled off. I cleaned it up, and that's my cup joint. This is what I had to do inside that air shaft, and it was a little more, a little more tedious in the air shaft. But basically, I mean, that's it. I mean, in the old days, if I had more room, especially in that air shaft, I maybe would have built a little more solder up around there. But I'm fairly confident that enough solder went down between the tube and the lead, because I control the heat. I got it down in there, that this is all you're going to need. This thing, like I told the homeowner before, my joint leaks, I pretty much guarantee you the rest of the lead pipe that's already going up in the air shaft and is in need of replacement will leak. So there it is, guys. I had to pull out some old tricks that I haven't done for a long time. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you guys get any questions on lead wiping, feel free. You can always reach me, info@bobsplumbingvideos.com. I look forward to seeing everybody. I hope to see you guys again in the next video, because I don't know when I'm going to run across next week. I don't know when I'm going to run across on a day-to-day basis. So I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. I'll see you again real soon. And before you guys leave, please hit that subscribe button. I would love to have you as a subscriber. And as I always like to say when I leave my videos, happy plumbing.